flipping through the newspapers, switching through multiple news channels, exploring different websites and online mediums for relevant news? Keeping up to date with important news is not only time-consuming but also requires meticulous upkeep of notes for thorough revision. With a limited period in hand and abundant resources to study from, do not let current affairs come in the way of your prelims success. Join the PT 365 program by Vision IAS and advance in your preparation for current affairs. Starting on 9th January at 5 p.m., this 20-day course offers comprehensive coverage of 1 year of current affairs in 60 hours. Join for improved knowledge with complete coverage of The Hindu, Indian Express, PIB, Economic Times, Yojana, Economic Survey, etc. Doubt-clearing sessions and mentoring for thorough knowledge. Access to Sandhan personalized test with 25,000 plus questions. Access to live and online classes for flexibility in timing. It's time to devote your energy to smart learning and not running. Enroll today and excel in UPSC prelims with a strong command of current affairs.
Hello and welcome to this edition of News Today. Before we begin, we would like to take a moment to correct an error made in one of our recent news reports. In News Today dated January 19th and 20th, 2024, in the Also in News titled BRICS, it was incorrectly mentioned that the total members is 11, including Saudi Arabia. The correct information is that the total members of BRICS are 10. Saudi Arabia was offered membership to the grouping in 2023, but the invitation remains unanswered till date. Now, coming back, let's have a look at the headlines first. Uttarakhand Cabinet approves a manual for Uniform Civil Code. US President signs executive order to withdraw from key global institutions. India outlines 6 broad principles for strengthening trade and investment with European Union. World Economic Forum highlights India's potential in building a resilient global digital health ecosystem. RBI revises guidelines on settlement of dues of borrowers by asset reconstruction companies. Report titled Takers Not Makers: The Unjust Poverty and Unearned Wealth of Colonialism, published by Oxfam. The Uttarakhand Cabinet has approved the manual for the Uniform Civil Code or UCC, marking a significant step towards its implementation in the state. Earlier this year, the Uttarakhand Assembly's UCC bill received the President's assent, paving the way for the state to potentially become the first in India to enact such a code. The UCC aims to establish a set of uniform personal laws applicable to all citizens, irrespective of religion, gender or caste, covering areas such as marriage, divorce, adoption, inheritance and succession. Constitutionally, the Directive Principles of State Policy, Part 4 under Article 44, mandate the state to work towards securing a UCC across India. Currently, personal laws are governed by respective religious laws, with Goa under the Portuguese Civil Code of 1867 having similar provisions to the UCC. But why is there a need for UCC? The need for the UCC stems from its potential to ensure gender equity, as existing laws on marriage and divorce often discriminate against women. Additionally, it could help promote social cohesion, as the religious and ethnic diversity in India's legal system can create divisions. It can also help reform society by counteracting superstitions and ultra-conservative practices rooted in faith and belief. However, implementing the UCC faces significant challenges. Balancing individual rights and state intervention is complex, especially given Article 25, which guarantees freedom of religion, and the 5th and 6th schedules, which protect tribal customs and beliefs. Furthermore, opposition from religious groups and leaders arises from concerns that the UCC could interfere with religious laws and customs, potentially causing social and political tensions. The Uniform Civil Code has been a subject of significant discussion in India, with key judgments by the Supreme Court emphasizing its importance. In 1985, the landmark case of Muhammad Ahmad Khan versus Shah Bano Begum highlighted the need for uniformity in personal laws. A decade later, in 1995, the case of Sarla Mudgal versus Union of India further underscored the necessity of reforms in personal laws. More recently, in 2017, the Supreme Court's judgment in Shaira Bano versus Union of India declared the practice of talaq-e biddat or triple talaq unconstitutional, marking another critical step towards gender justice and equality in personal laws. These judgments collectively reflect the judiciary's consistent advocacy for a uniform legal framework to ensure equality and fairness across all communities. In conclusion, while the UCC has the potential to uphold equality, justice, and inclusivity, its formulation and implementation must focus on devising a secular code that emphasizes these principles without imposing uniformity.
In a major development, the US President has signed an executive order to withdraw the United States from key global institutions, including the World Health Organization and the Paris Agreement. This decision, rooted in the America First policy, is set to reshape norms and institutions related to international cooperation. Let's break down the impact of this move. Firstly, the withdrawal is likely to cause a severe shortage of funds. For instance, during 2024-25, the United States contributed a significant 19% of the WHO's total revenue. Without this funding, the organization could face a financial crunch. Secondly, it may undermine global climate actions, with 2024 being recorded as the hottest year on record and the United States ranking as the world's second largest greenhouse gas emitter after China. Its exit from the Paris Agreement could hinder collective efforts to combat climate change. Additionally, let's take a look at the broader impact of weak global institutions. As global institutions lose strength, one notable consequence is the emergence of regional trade blocs. Countries may increasingly shift their focus to smaller regional trade agreements, gradually moving away from multilateralism. This trend also ties into a shift toward deglobalization, where declining trust and effectiveness of global institutions prompt nations to prioritize self-reliance over global cooperation. At the same time, the weakening of these institutions could stall progress toward a green economy, jeopardizing global environmental goals. Such delays could have far-reaching effects, particularly on least developed countries or LDCs, which rely heavily on climate financing, health aid, and other critical support. Without these, existing inequalities could deepen further. Moreover, the weakening of global institutions poses a serious threat to global climate discussions, as fragmented cooperation makes it increasingly difficult to build consensus on urgent climate actions. Ultimately, this could lead to the fragmentation of global governance itself, making effective coordination on global challenges far more complex and elusive. Now, let's turn our attention to the challenges faced by major global institutions. Starting with the United Nations. The Security Council, its most powerful organ, has yet to undergo reforms to include representation from developing countries. Moving on to the World Health Organization or WHO. Criticism of institutional deficiencies and alleged political biases, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, have raised questions about its credibility. Similarly, the World Trade Organization or WTO is grappling with broad disagreements over agriculture subsidies, trade barriers, and new age issues like e-commerce, compounded by ongoing trade tensions between the US and China. Finally, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change or UNFCCC is facing funding challenges. At the recent COP29 held in Azerbaijan, the commitment was limited to just $300 billion by 2035, far short of the $1.3 trillion demanded by developing countries to address climate challenges. This brings us to the reforms needed in these global institutions. Structural reforms are essential to make these bodies more independent, responsive, and representative. This would ensure increased accountability, integrity, and legitimacy. Additionally, there is a pressing need for greater financing for developing countries to combat poverty and address global challenges, including climate change. Finally, frameworks to tackle emerging challenges such as cybersecurity and regional coordination are imperative to strengthen international cooperation. The US withdrawal and the challenges faced by global institutions emphasize the pressing need for reform and collective action. How the world navigates these changes will shape the future of international cooperation.
Moving on, let's turn our attention to India's 6 broad principles for strengthening trade and investment with the European Union. The Minister of Commerce and Industry has outlined 6 key principles aimed at fostering a mutually beneficial partnership between India and the European Union. Let's take a closer look. The first principle emphasizes a focus on the common values of democracy, the rule of law, and an independent judiciary. This is followed by the goal of building a commercially meaningful, fair, and equitable trade agenda, which seeks to address existing trade barriers. Next, India aims to exchange best practices and harmonize standards to achieve a production system characterized by zero defects and zero environmental effects. The fourth principle highlights the importance of developing cutting-edge technologies, ensuring the security of critical raw material supply chains, and building resilient supply chains. The fifth principle underlines cooperation in trade and sustainable development, adhering to the concept of common but differentiated responsibility. Finally, the sixth principle envisions a partnership in mutual growth and development, strengthening economic ties further. But what is the significance of the EU for India? The EU holds strategic importance for India, particularly in addressing concerns related to China. These include China's global expansion through the Belt and Road Initiative, military assertiveness in Asia, and misuse of multilateral trading systems. Additionally, the EU can help India in economic de-risking, as India faces a growing trade deficit with China and depends heavily on it for critical inputs. Furthermore, the EU offers attractive capabilities in critical and emerging technologies such as cybersecurity, space, quantum technology, and synthetic biology. Now, let's dive deeper into India-EU relations. India and the EU have enjoyed a strong relationship since the signing of the Strategic Partnership in 2004. This was further reinforced by the adoption of the EU-India Joint Action Plan in 2005. Which covers political, economic, and development cooperation. On the economic front, bilateral trade between India and the EU is estimated to have crossed $180 billion in 2023-24, with the EU being a significant source of foreign direct investment totaling approximately $117.34 billion. However, challenges remain in bilateral relations, particularly the non-conclusion of the EU-India Free Trade Agreement due to disagreements over labor and environmental standards. This comprehensive framework underlines the importance of strengthening India-EU ties to foster economic growth and address global challenges collaboratively.
Moving ahead, the World Economic Forum has spotlighted India's remarkable potential in building a resilient global digital health ecosystem. With a rapidly evolving digital healthcare infrastructure, India is bridging the gap between urban and rural healthcare services by leveraging telemedicine, electronic health records, and AI-driven diagnostics. Let's dive into the key features that define this transformation. One significant aspect is interoperability and standardization, which ensures seamless data exchange between stakeholders. For instance, the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission aims to create a nationwide digital health ecosystem, integrating healthcare providers and patients through unique health IDs. Another critical element is public-private collaboration, which drives innovation and expansion. This is supported by initiatives like the Health Facility Register, a centrally maintained repository facilitating standardized data exchange between private and public health facilities. In addition, there is a strong focus on affordability and accessibility, with digital tools being leveraged to make healthcare more inclusive. A prime example is the eSanjeevani telemedicine service, which connects remote areas to healthcare providers, enabling millions of consultations. India's achievements in this domain position it as a global leader. The country's robust digital infrastructure and large population create an ideal testing ground for developing solutions to universal healthcare challenges, such as rising costs, unequal access, and chronic disease burdens. What's more, India's successful models, including cross-sector partnerships and public-private collaborations, can serve as blueprints for other regions, especially low and middle-income countries. Emulating these frameworks could help address global healthcare challenges effectively. India's initiatives in digital health are equally noteworthy. The UWIN portal, for instance, maintains vaccination records for pregnant women and children up to 17 years under the Universal Immunization Program. The Arogya Setu app, powered by the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, provides access to a range of digital health services. Meanwhile, the National Telemental Health Program has been instrumental in improving access to quality mental health counseling and care services. Additionally, the e-hospital application is streamlining the internal workflows and processes of hospitals across the country. India's digital health revolution is not just transforming healthcare within its borders, but also offering scalable solutions for the global community. It stands as a beacon of innovation and inclusivity in addressing the challenges of modern healthcare.
Moving on, the Reserve Bank of India has revised its guidelines for the settlement of borrower dues by asset reconstruction companies or ARCs. These guidelines, issued under the powers conferred by the Securitization and Reconstruction of Financial Assets and Enforcement of Security Interest Act 2002, SIMplifies Act, aim to streamline the resolution of non-performing assets or NPAs and bad loans. The SIMplifies Act empowers banks and financial institutions to recover defaulted loans by auctioning collateral properties without requiring court intervention. The key highlights of the revised guidelines include the requirement for every ARC to frame a board-approved policy for settling borrower dues, addressing aspects like eligibility criteria for one-time settlements. For accounts with outstanding dues exceeding 1 crore rupees, settlements can only proceed after evaluation by an independent advisory committee or IAC, comprising financial and legal experts. The recommendations of the IAC must be deliberated by the Board of Directors, including at least 2 independent directors, who will also assess alternative recovery options. For accounts with dues of 1 crore rupees or below, a competent authority established under a board-approved policy can expedite the resolution process, while ensuring officials involved in acquiring the financial asset cannot participate in the approval of settlement to prevent conflicts of interest. But what are asset reconstruction companies or ARCs? ARCs are financial institutions that purchase NPAs or bad assets from banks and financial institutions, enabling the latter to clean up their balance sheets. Registered as companies by the RBI under the SIMplifies Act, ARCs play a vital role in the financial ecosystem. ARCs hold great significance as they facilitate quicker resolution of stressed financial assets, and they also free banks from debt recovery, allowing banks to focus on their core activities. Additionally, ARCs contribute to the development of markets for distressed assets, create alternate investment opportunities, inject liquidity into the banking system, and improve the valuation and capital raising ability of banks.
Now we bring you an insightful discussion on a report titled Takers Not Makers: The Unjust Poverty and Unearned Wealth of Colonialism, published by Oxfam. The report highlights that the wealth of billionaires has skyrocketed to unprecedented levels, while people living in poverty all over the world continue to face multiple crises. To begin with, the wealth of billionaires has surged to staggering levels. In 2024, billionaires' wealth grew at a rate 3 times faster than in 2023. Meanwhile, over 3.5 billion people globally continue to live on less than $6.85 per day. Shockingly, the richest 1% now controls more wealth than 95% of the global population. Oxfam also underscores the colonial inheritance of extreme wealth among the ultra-rich. Much of this wealth, the report argues, is unearned and stems from the exploitative practices of colonialism. Moving on, let's focus on India's colonial wealth trade, which is a glaring example of this exploitation. Between 1765 and 1900, the UK drained $64.82 trillion from India, with $33.8 trillion of this wealth benefiting the top 10% of Britain's population. This historical colonialism has left a profound impact on present-day inequality, creating a legacy of exploitation and economic disparity. For instance, Arbitrary colonial partitions have resulted in border conflicts. Social divisions like racism persist, while land concentration and poor health indicators continue to plague the global south. Additionally, global disparities in research and funding are stark reminders of this colonial past. The report also emphasizes that colonialism is not just a thing of the past, but persists in neo-colonial forms. One such modern phenomenon is digital colonialism, where corporations from the global north dominate digital resources. Similarly, exploitative corporate structures allow multinational corporations to profit by underpaying workers in the global south. Moreover, institutions of global governance remain heavily influenced by the global north, perpetuating these inequalities. Finally, let's revisit how colonial practices drained India's wealth during British rule. As outlined by Dadabhai Naoroji's drain of wealth theory, the exploitation took various forms. Excessive land revenue through high taxes deprived farmers of their income, leaving them in a perpetual state of poverty. Trade exploitation further compounded the issue, as India's raw materials were exported to Britain, and British goods flooded the Indian market, leading to the collapse of local industries. This decline is evident in the fact that while India contributed 25% to global industrial output in 1750, this figure dropped to a mere 2% by 1900. Additionally, the wealth drain was exacerbated by home charges, which used Indian revenue to fund British administration, currency manipulation, and sending profits back to Britain. This report not only highlights the stark disparities of today, but also calls attention to the colonial roots of modern wealth and poverty. In today's Place in News, let's turn our focus to France with its capital, Paris. Recently, India and France have agreed to jointly assess maritime threats in the Indian Ocean region, focusing on piracy, terrorism, smuggling, etc. Now, let's take a closer look at some key political and geographical features of France. France shares its land boundaries with Spain and Andorra to the south, Italy, Switzerland, and Germany to the east, Luxembourg to the northeast, and Belgium to the north. Its maritime boundaries include the Atlantic Ocean and the Bay of Biscay to the west, the Mediterranean Sea to the south, and the English Channel to the northwest. Geographically, France boasts remarkable landmarks. Its highest peak, Mont Blanc, is a part of the Alps. The country is also home to the Strait of Dover, which separates France from the southeastern England. When it comes to rivers, the Seine River, on which Paris is located, stands out. Other significant rivers include the Loire River and the Rhone River. Additionally, France features the massive Central, a forested plateau, and the Pyrenees Mountains, which form the border with Spain.
As we conclude today's main news, let's have a look at some quick updates. Recently, Supreme Court highlighted the doctrine of merger. It was explained in the case of Kunji Ahmad vs. State of Kerala 2000. As per this doctrine, there cannot be more than one decree or operative order governing the same subject matter at a given point in time. The National E-Governance Division under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has developed Entity Locker. It is a secure, cloud-based solution that simplifies storage, sharing, and verification of documents for large organizations, corporations, etc. It is a critical component of India's digital public infrastructure. Recently, annual Edelman Trust Barometer was released before the start of the World Economic Forum annual meeting. Released by Edelman Trust, it is a survey of 28 countries that studies the influence of trust across society, government, media, businesses, and NGOs. Tactical ballistic missile Pralay and long-range Pinaka rocket system will be part of Republic Day parade. Pralay missile is surface-to-surface short-range ballistic missile with a range of 150 to 500 km, developed by Defense Research and Development Organization. Indonesia's Mount Ibu on the remote island of Halmahera erupted 1,000 times this month. As an active volcano, Mount Ibu is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, a region known for frequent volcanic activity and earthquakes. Indonesia has numerous volcanoes due to its location on converging tectonic plates. Recently, Jharkhand Forest Department initiated a study to revive the dwindling population of bison at Palamu Tiger Reserve. Indian bison is a massively built, very strong and social animal. Their habitat is mainly in the Western Ghats and they prefer evergreen forests and moist deciduous forests. Recently, Karnataka Forest Department initiated talks to relocate Shirikanahalli hamlet located within Chincholi Wildlife Sanctuary. Chincholi was declared a sanctuary in 2011 and it's also the first dry-land wildlife sanctuary in South India. Red sanders and sandalwood are part of the major flora here. Central Drug Standard Control Organization has approved second living drugs, Cartemi, a chimeric antigen receptor or CAR T cell therapy for treating blood cancer. A living drug is a therapy that involves extracting a patient's cells, modifying them, and then reintroducing them into the body. Before we sign off, let's challenge your understanding in today's installment of Test Your Learning. Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this episode of News Today engaging. For the solutions to the quiz and to access the PDF version of News Today, remember to visit the provided links in the description.